Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in and welcome to the closing ceremony of the 9th Annual STF Summit. Once again, I'm Katie Riley, the Director of Strategic Partnerships here at She's the First. It has certainly been an eventful week, and we've loved having the chance to connect with you directly on your campuses all over the world. Before we start, I want to give a quick shout out and a very special thank you to the chapter members at American University, to Anika from Vista Del Lago High School, to our Girls Advisory Council members, Leah and Ananya, as well as our volunteers, Allison, Kelly, Naomi, Fiona, Margaret, Rachel, and Christian, for all of their support in bringing this week together. Now, this week, so many of you have shared that you have big goals and exciting plans for your school year ahead. But we know you're not going to stop there. You might be ending this week thinking about your futures. How can you carry this passion and this purpose of fighting for girls with you after your time on campus ends and into your future careers? Well, there is no one better to get those ideas flowing and give you some inspiration than the three women at the helm of She's the First. Our co-founders, Kristen Brandt and Tammy Tibbetts, and our board chair, Tara Abrahams. Now, you probably know a little bit about Kristen and Tammy already, such as how they started She's the First when they were just 21 and 23, how they both started their careers in the magazine industry and then pivoted to work for She's the First full time, a little over 10 years ago now. Also, you might know that last year they became the authors of Impact, a step-by-step plan to create the world you want to live in. I've got my copy right behind me on the shelf here. And it's a book that will guide you through the topic we're going to focus on today in even more detail. So I recommend picking it up if you haven't read it yet. And if you don't know Tara Abrahams, the board chair of She's the First, you are about to be awed by her career. Tara is currently the head of Impact at The Meteor, which is a group of creative people using the power of storytelling, journalism, and art to advance the freedom and dignity of all women. Over the past decade, Tara has worked for several companies and nonprofits, all advancing the rights of girls and women. Here is just a very short glimpse at her resume. She was the managing director at Arabella Advisors, shifting millions of dollars into organizations and campaigns that advanced gender and racial equity. She was a consultant at the Girls Opportunity Alliance, the organization created by former First Lady Michelle Obama. And she even introduced the First Lady to She's the First. Thank you so much, Tara, for that one. She was the executive director of the Girl Project, a campaign by Glamour magazine, which invested in girls' education and empowerment. And she was the president of Girl Rising, back when the now famous documentary came out to promote girls' education. And as if Tara wasn't busy enough, last year, during the pandemic, while also caring for her 3 young children, Tara founded a magazine called Kahani that publishes the words and work of girls all over the world. Now, I personally feel very lucky to call all 3 of these women mentors, and I'm so excited that everyone watching is going to have the opportunity to hear more from them and to hear how they all got their start in their careers fighting for girls. For scheduling reasons, the following segment you're going to see is pre-recorded, but Kristen and Tammy will be joining us live in just a little bit. So with that, let's welcome Tara Abrahams, Kristen Brandt, and Tammy Tibbetts.
Hi, everyone. We are so honored to be your STF Summit finale. The 3 of us actually chat every week together, so we are excited to welcome you into our inner circle. I'm Tammy Tibbetts, the co-founder and CEO of She's the First, as well as a proud College of New Jersey graduate, so shout out to the chapter there.
And I'm Kristen Brandt, co-founder and chief programs officer at She's the First.
And I'm Tara Abrahams. I am the board chair of She's the First, and I'm so thrilled to be part of this year's summit. If there's anything that I miss, it's gathering together. So even if we're not together in person, it's so nice to feel this connection with all of you and to have the opportunity to talk about what it means to have a career focused on girls. When I look back on my career, which has been a few years now for sure, I didn't always know what the next step would be. And there were good parts about that and there were bad parts about that. But what I will say is that in terms of advice for all of you who are tuning in, I think there are really practical steps that you can take in order to position yourself to take advantage of the opportunities that will come your way around working closely with girls and on girls' rights, especially if you follow the impact plan that you create for your life, which you can take a page from Kristen and Tammy's book to learn more about.
Thanks, Sarah. We actually do start our book, Impact, with the concept of a North Star, because we think it's incredibly important to let your end goal, your vision for what you want to achieve, guide the way in creating impact in the world. And along with that, to let your own personal experience be the biggest guide in that pathway. So why don't we start there? I'm curious to hear from both of you about your own journey that brought you to care so much about. Maybe you start off.
Yeah, I love telling this story because it brings me back in time to when I was 17, like exactly the age of all of you who are leading our high school and college chapters. I grew up in New Jersey, and as a student, I was painfully shy. I hated anytime I had to raise my hand in class, gave me so much anxiety. Speaking in front of groups, giving a presentation would just make me sick to my stomach. Ironically, because now every week, Kristen and I are doing something like this and speaking to groups, and I love it, and I'm very comfortable doing it. But back then, that wasn't the case. And it got to the point that when I graduated from high school, in our yearbook, they did superlatives where the students would vote each other all these flattering things like most likely to succeed, most likely to be president, best dressed, best smile. And they voted me out of a class of like almost 1,000 students, the most shy, which to this day I say shouldn't even have been an option, a category, because that is no compliment at all to anyone who receives it. But, you know, I went along with it and I posed for the picture in the yearbook, and they had me hide behind a wall to take this photo. And it was, a humiliating moment, looking back on it. But yet it was the moment that I vividly remember, like speaking to myself and promising myself that that wouldn't be my legacy. That wouldn't be a label that I was going to live the rest of my life by. I was going off to college in a few short months, first in my family to do so, and I was studying journalism. While I did not like speaking out loud, I was very comfortable with my words in writing. And I just made that commitment to myself that I would be able to use my voice and my words in service of other girls and women around the world. I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. And I think I had a lot of regrets on my younger teenage years and the confidence I didn't have, that I wanted other girls to have that self-esteem that I didn't. So that kind of set me on a path to pursue a career at 17 magazine at first, and reaching girls through editorial. But then, as you'll read in the book or you've heard before, we'll talk about later, of course, it was a huge spark behind She's the First, and that passion that drew Kristen and I together.
Wow, Tammy, thank you so much for sharing that. I don't think I've heard all of that before. And it's interesting because having known you after that period of time, after you had that moment, I would never think about you as shy. It's really interesting. I would just never think about you as shy. But a lot of your story resonated with me personally. I think in a slightly different way, I also felt like I was a little bit stifled when I was growing up, probably around the same time that you felt very shy, or people saw you and perceived you as so shy that they gave you that moniker in the yearbook. I think for me, I was the daughter of two immigrants. My dad is from India. My mom is from the Philippines. This was, I'm going to reveal my age a little bit, but this was sort of late 80s, early 90s was when I was in middle and high school, those formative years. And I think really at that time, the order of the day was really about blending in. It was about sort of staying within the lines, Don't raise your hand too frequently. Do what you're supposed to do to all of those things, to get into college, a good college, et cetera, et cetera. And that, I think I shrank myself a little bit. And it showed later on, even through college and in the early years of my career, I sort of stuck to what might have been expected of me as someone who went to a high performing college and then ended up going to grad school, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later. But it was really about get the right job at the right company. And again, blend in, just stay within the lines. And I was at one of those jobs, honestly, not very inspired by what I was doing, always having a career that was focused on making the world a better place, helping people. That's really what I wanted to do. I knew that from a very young age. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're always inspired by what you're doing. And so I was in one of those jobs. On paper, looked great. Not a job that you would leave or turn down, in other words. And I was working at a small foundation, doing interesting work here in New York City. And I ended up having a very accidental meeting with the founder of what would eventually become Girl Rising. And for those of you who don't know, Girl Rising was a campaign and feature film that came out in 2013, telling the stories of 9 girls in 9 different countries. And through partnerships with NGOs and organizations like She's the First, which was just getting started around that time as well, we were able to really spread so much awareness about the importance of educating girls around the world. But in that moment, in that first meeting, it really was a moment that I always look back on as my lightning bolt moment. Because as soon as I heard about the power of educating girls and the importance of investing in girls to create so much positive change, whether that was economic development, community health, decreased rates of child marriage, et cetera, it just lit me on fire. That was the moment when I started to realize that this was what I was called to do. Even within the context of a career that was great and that was having impact, it still wasn't what my purpose was. And in that moment, I found my purpose. Now, as an aside, and a little bit more personally, I was pregnant with my first daughter at the time. And I was really thinking about what is it that I want my professional life to look like as a parent, as a mother. And now the fact that there was a little girl growing inside my belly made it all the more poignant and special that basically what I arrived at was the opportunity to really support this growing movement to invest in and lift up the needs of girls. And so, that was really it for me. And it all kind of came together in that one lightning bolt moment.
It's interesting you talk about lightning bolt moment and that lighting fire within you, because I think for me, I actually didn't have a lightning bolt moment, but I did have that constant burning fire. And that's because for me, I grew up surrounded by women. My mom had me pretty young. She was 19 at the time. And so I actually grew up with my grandparents and usually 4 aunts at any given moment in the house who all raised me together. So I had this really incredible look at the variety of ways that women could exhibit strength and creativity and the different ways that women could be women. And I was always incredibly inspired by that. But within this kind of family system, the men that came through it were frankly abusive in different ways. And so from a really early age, honestly, I don't remember a time before this. I had this fire within me, this certainty that I needed to help to make the world a more equal place for girls and for women, that I needed to find ways to make sure that women were honored for their own strength and had power within society. And so that's always been something that was a through line, even before I think I could really articulate that as my North Star or as a thing that really drove me. I went to college, I went to university for journalism because I wanted to work in women's magazines, because I thought if I could talk to women, if I could write stories about what they were going through, then I could create change in that way. I became a self-defense instructor for survivors of violence. And, even through all of this, it actually took until I was in my late 20s for me to pull all of the pieces together and realize, oh, actually, that powerlessness that I felt growing up, that is the through line in my story. That is what has been driving me every step of the way, even kind of ironically, before I even realized that that was the engine, that was the motivation for what I was doing. And so I think sometimes when you think about your North Star, it's okay if you can't quite articulate it yet, if you've got kind of a vague idea of what drives you, of what pushes you, because it will come to crystallize itself with time, as it did for me. And Tara, as it sounds like it did for you too.
It did. I mean, it took some time, and I feel so fortunate and grateful that I ended up kind of arriving at the place that I think you both found in an interesting way much earlier on in your lives and in your careers. And it's clear that we just have, all of us, that's why we work so well together. We have this shared passion for serving girls that stems from our unique experiences as girls, as young women. But I'm curious for both of you, do you remember how you started? I mean, Kristen, you just used the word crystallize. When did that vision start to crystallize into an actual kind of plan for how you wanted your future to go? So what were the practical steps that you started to take in order to turn, I think what sounds like it felt good from a sort of feeling the need, that kind of gap within you in terms of that powerlessness, into something that was more, practical, maybe even tactical?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I did go to school for journalism and for magazine journalism, especially. And we actually did start She's the First when I was still in university. I was still at Syracuse at the time. But She's the First was still a side project. It was a media campaign. Tammy and I had no intention at that point of turning She's the First into a full-time nonprofit, let alone our full-time jobs. And so I graduated from Syracuse, and while working on She's the First on the side, I went into the magazine world, first at Parents Magazine, and then I had this chance to join Glamour, which I jumped at because, of course, that was where I felt like I was supposed to be. That's what all of this work had been leading up to. And the job at Glamour was actually running their top 10 college women program, which was at that point a scholarship program for girls in their junior year of college all across the US. And so my job was, essentially to go through these profiles of incredible girls, incredible women, and to whittle that down into kind of a top 10, and then to develop a trip for them and kind of what the scholarship meant. And I think that in a lot of ways, I don't necessarily believe in fate. I don't know what higher powers are out there, but the fact that my kind of big magazine job was making sure that girls had money to go to college and were recognized for the things that they were bringing to the world and the change that they were creating in the world, while working on She's the First and then making the decision to go full time with She's the First, was just like these puzzle pieces kind of clicking together. And I realized that, I can make it my life's mission to ensure that girls everywhere had that recognition, that they had the support that they needed, and that, girls and women had a clearer pathway to power in the world, whether that's, through going to college, or that's through, through the storytelling, or through working with international nonprofits as we do now with She's the First. So I think that link was really interesting, which I think, Tammy as well, you also had a similar kind of link between your magazine work and your eventual She's the First job.
Yeah, I think, Kristen, you're such a great example of how sometimes, you'll be lucky enough that an opportunity is presented in front of you that is like on the nose for what you care about, like a college scholarship program. I mean, like, come on, that is perfect alignment with what She's the First came to be. Other times, though, there are opportunities that are kind of adjacent to that. And I think it's important to recognize saying yes to those things can lead you where you want to go. I'm a big believer of don't just fixate on the front door metaphorically of the house you want to get into, but sometimes you got to go through the basement door, the attic window. As Kristen and Tara know more than anyone else, because we have these weekly meetings about funders we're pursuing, celebrity advocates we're pursuing, and we have some big dreams and aspirations, but it's never like, oh, let me call this person up. It's like, who do we know who is connected to that person? And how can you find that back door in? So for me, after I graduated, well, even before I graduated, my very first internship, I saw a posting to be a beauty intern at 17 magazine. And at that time in my life, I did not wear any makeup. I knew nothing about, other than putting on like clear lip gloss, didn't know anything about makeup. But I applied for this unpaid internship, and I really stood out to the hiring editor for my passion. And she said, I'm not hiring right now, but at this date, I'll be looking for summer interns. So I literally emailed her at like mid 12:01 a.m. on that day to be like, I always kind of went the extra mile with my passion. I think that helped me stand out, even when in this case, I knew nothing about makeup. That wasn't the important thing. And I got the internship. All I did that summer was organize makeup in a closet. It was not educational or purposeful, but it was at 17 magazine. And it was at a publication at that time in print, it was reaching millions and millions of girls around the nation. And little did I know that in just a few years after I graduated, that would be where I would get my first job, being the first social media editor of 17. When I was an intern, social media didn't even exist. And when I had that role as an actual paid employee, representing the voice of 17 on social media, I got to connect and interact with teen girls all the time. And that really, again, like you can't overanalyze this stuff in the moment because you don't know where it's going to lead. But when you look back and I see how I was in a position there to amplify girls' voices to wider audiences, all of that ties directly back to She's the First's mission and ethos. So I guess, to sum that all up, my advice often to students and to young graduates is that don't think that your first opportunity has to have, girls, working at a girls' foundation or organization like scholarship manager in a job title. If you can end up working somewhere else that has a women's network and you can have influence in joining that group and connecting them to She's the First or other causes that you care about. And as you're meeting people, especially of influence and power, who care about the same things, you're building this network that is like a trail of breadcrumbs that leads you to the next opportunity, which it sounds like, Tara, when you met with the founder of Girl Rising, it was that kind of a situation.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there are a couple of things that both of you said in telling this part of your story. One, Kristen, was you talked about power, which is the first time that word has come up in this conversation. Incredibly important when we're talking about women and girls and trying to advance their rights. A lot of it boils down to power and how you accumulate it, how you exercise it, how you use it for good. I think the other thing, Tammy, that you mentioned was this idea of adjacency. So coming into a space that isn't necessarily at the core of, in this case, girls and women, girls' rights, girls' education, but it is somewhat adjacent. That moment that I had with the founder of Girl Rising, I think was the culmination of doing things that, while they weren't at the core of my purpose because I hadn't discovered it yet, they were certainly adjacent to the idea of having a career that would accelerate impact. And so being able to go into that meeting and pull in the idea, well, yeah, I went to graduate school for business. I don't have an experience in journalism or in film, but I have the experience of putting together a strategy and mapping out how that strategy leads to a particular vision for impact. Certainly in the social sector, I had that kind of context. And so, for me, I will tell you, the couple of years that I spent at business school were not necessarily a high point. They were sort of the epitome of adjacency. And the way that I sometimes describe it was taking a very large dose of bitter medicine, because it just wasn't necessarily my natural habitat. And yet medicine helps you, right? It gives you the strength to kind of navigate and become healthier. And so for me, getting my MBA was so powerful because it allowed me to go into meetings and rooms and interact with people with power, and be credible and be legitimate. And it's not to say that the MBA was the only thing that gave me that, but it was an extra tool in my arsenal, I will say, and it kind of gave me that boost of confidence. Besides the fact, of course, that I learned a lot, and that's not an unimportant point, but it is to say, the career that you carve out in this sector, I think by definition may not look like anyone else's career in the sector. And it might not be that you do an internship at She's the First and then end up working there your entire life. I think there's beauty and actually a lot of value and power in the meandering that I have done in particular. And as an aside, it is kind of amazing that one of those meanderings also led me to Glamour magazine, leading the Girl Project, which of course gave me a chance to come back around full circle to my love and support of She's the First, but we can talk about that at another time. It is, though, amazing to me that all of us had these interesting stints in journalism and now find ourselves right here, all being the leaders of She's the First. But speaking of that, actually, I never thought I would say that I worked at Glamour magazine. How do you both think about the importance of working in the nonprofit or the kind of the social impact sector in terms of being able to champion girls in your career? Is that the only option? Or do you think there are other options for people who are tuning in who might not be ready to make that leap, at least at this moment? And Tammy, you started to get to it, so maybe you can kick us off.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's certainly one option. Just like you said, Tara, with the MBA, that is one option. That is one type of launch pad for your career, but it doesn't mean, it's not this formula that everyone needs to do that, and nor does everyone need to work in the nonprofit sector in order to have a purposeful career. And this is something Kristen and I are so passionate about making this point, that it was a big impetus behind writing Impact, because we wanted people to see how, based on your skill sets and your lived experience and your passion, this can translate wherever you are. And we have so many examples now from over the past 12 years of individuals we've worked with in every industry you could think of, who have found ways to bridge their professional life with the mission of She's the First. A couple examples. One I'll share with you all because you met her earlier in the summit, Kate Lord. At the time we met Kate, she was a multimedia journalist for the Wall Street Journal. That was her day job. And she was volunteering for She's the First on the side. She actually helped launch that original YouTube video in 2009 that got us started. And then on her own personal vacation time, she began joining Kristen on trips to visit our community-based organization partners and capturing that photography, first just as a volunteer. And then we began to hire her as a freelancer. But she still worked within newspaper industry. But fast forward several years, now she's in grad school and she was looking for a more flexible job. So she left media and now she works at She's the First as our communications specialist. And you can just see how something that started out on the side ended up becoming, brought her very closely to inside of She's the First. Other times we have companies, agencies that work with us on a pro bono basis. So we've had volunteers who went to their company and said, She's the First has a huge campaign coming up. Can we get together and take them on as a pro bono client. So they're actually getting paid by their company to support us on a campaign like Girls Get Loud for International Day of the Girl. So there's all sorts of ways that you can support She's the First or other causes from where you are. And then if you decide later on that, no, it makes sense for me to pivot into a nonprofit, then you've already got this resume of experience without having, you might actually get that nonprofit job later based on the history you have as a volunteer or as a board member. Kristen, do any other examples come to mind?
Well, it strikes me that a lot of times people think about taking on these volunteer positions in order to eventually get a job at a nonprofit. And for some of us, that's great, and that is the path. But I think what we need to remember as a collective, as a group working toward real change in the world for girls and for women, is that we can't actually achieve that if we are all huddled in one sector of the world. Tara was talking about going for her MBA and having that be kind of a bitter medicine that she had to swallow, really understanding how the business world works and how different that is perhaps from some of the impact pieces that you were really working on. And I think that's a really important point to remember, is that whatever industry you're in, we need you, right? We need people across all of these different industries and sectors working toward gender equity so that we can achieve it one day. We're not going to get there. Every single one of us moves into the nonprofit sector and tries to push change from there. So I think no matter where you are kind of in your career planning steps right now, remember that no matter what your job title is, you can be working toward this better world for girls and for women. And that's something, She's the First, Tammy and I especially, we're very practical people. We very much believe in
I think this is something very easy to do. You can do it today. So many students come to me and they ask, like, what more could I be doing? And I really think you're doing enough. I think you're doing way more than the average person because you're part of the She's the First campus program. You may not be publicizing that on your personal LinkedIn, on your personal bio for Instagram, Twitter. So make sure that you're getting the recognition for not just being a student wherever you are, but for being a girls' rights activist, a girls' rights advocate. Like, put that as your title and lead with that. And it will just enable you to attract these opportunities and the recognition for all of these things that you've already done through She's the First and elsewhere. Because my hunch is that it's not that you have to do more, it's that you just have to make sure people are aware of the amazing work you've already done.
That's so great, Tammy, because one of the things that I was going to recommend was along those lines. Have conversations about the work that you're already doing. Tell someone who doesn't know that you are doing what you're doing to support girls' rights around the world, because I think sparking conversation with someone one-on-one is one of the most effective ways that we can all make change in our everyday lives, truly. If I were to be able to add on, I think it's also just do what you're doing, be persistent, and remember the work is hard. The work is hard. So the persistence is so critical. I mean, the three of us know, having been in the sector in various ways for so long, it's not easy. There are going to be obstacles and setbacks. There are going to be days when it just feels so difficult to try and make headway on these intractable issues of just dismantling persistent gender bias in lots of communities, cultures, and countries. But if those biases are persistent, we have to be that much more persistent. We have to be dogged and relentless almost in our pursuit of of the goal, the big dream, right, of a gender equal world. And so that sounds really big and hard, but at the same time, I do feel that just building it into your everyday, putting it on your social media profiles, having a conversation with the people that you stand in line with truly at coffee, as we all get to go back and stand in line for coffee. Those are the things that I do think lead to lasting change and everyday change. And that's incredibly powerful.
And my piece of advice, which clicks right into this, is in order to be relentless, you need to really understand your why. Why is this so important to you? Why is this so meaningful to you? Why are you so connected to this? And why is this work so important to the world? And honestly, sit down with those two questions and journal them out. Really get clear on that narrative for yourself of the why this is so key, why this is so important. And you'll be able to use that to motivate you, and that relentlessness that Tara was talking about. And you'll be able to use that in those conversations, those, LinkedIn posts that Tammy is encouraging you to make as well. I know I could, because I do, talk to both of you for many, many more hours. But we are running out of time. So thank you, Tara, so much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and Tammy and I now are going to switch over and join our live viewers for our final moments, creating a new vision together. So thank you both for this.
Bye, Tara.
Bye, Tara.
And we're back live from our Brooklyn apartments. Happy Saturday, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
We wanted to end STF Summit in a really special way. So we're going to do a visioning exercise with you, because this has always helped the She's the First team find our next steps forward. So we hope that this is something you enjoy and that you can replay anytime with your chapter members when you need some inspiration.
I believe in visioning exercises so much because I think they're such a great way to spend time with ourselves, to really think about who we are and what we want to achieve and how to bring those pieces all together. So for this visioning exercise, you'll probably want a notebook or just something that you can take notes in along the way. So if you need to, go ahead and grab one now. This visioning exercise is one that we're going to drop into and come out of twice each time, so that you can write down some of your thoughts and some of the ideas that you had along the way. So you're going to hear some of my voice, you're going to hear some of Tammy's voice. Don't let it throw you off. And throughout, don't let perfection get in the way of really experiencing it. Let your instinct guide you. And if you end up with some half-formed thoughts or ideas, that's fine. That's perfectly okay. Just write those down too. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So go ahead and, do a little shoulder roll, get relaxed, get ready. And then if you would, I would love for you to close your eyes and take a deep breath in. And let your breath out. And breathe in for a count of 3. And out for a count of 3. Again, in, 2, 3. Out, 2, 3. And as you continue that breathing, I want you to picture yourself on a hike, looking up at a mountain trail. It can be one that you've done before, or maybe it's just one that you're making up as you go along. But this hike that you're picturing is one that in this world you've been on for quite a while. Because in fact, you've been working toward the summit of this mountain in one way or another your entire life. But in this moment, I want you to picture the trees around you. What do they look like? What does the trail in front of your feet look like? Is it gravel? Is it dirt? Are there ferns on the side? You can feel your legs a little sore, your calves burning a bit from walking uphill, uphill, uphill. You feel a breeze on your neck, and you realize that there's an overlook just ahead. And when you get to it, you start to admire the view. And from that overlook, you can actually see the trail the entire way up to where you're standing right here in this moment. And along that path, you can see all of the moments that help to shape the person you are today. This person who's focused on impact, on social justice, on creating a better world. I want you to really picture those moments that led you to becoming this person right now. Which experiences shaped how you see the world? Which people shaped how you see the world? What were the moments in which you decided that change needs to happen, that you're going to be part of it? When you're ready, I'd like you to take one deep breath in and out, and open your eyes if they're closed, and write down those moments that you saw along your path. Just take quick notes, bullet point it out, any of those memories that popped up for you, the people that you saw along the way, the experiences that turned you into this change maker, into this person who believes in a better world and wants a better world. Write all of that down. I'll give you one more moment just to get those thoughts out.
Okay, I got lost in that myself, Kristen, a summit at the summit. Well, let's drop back in now and close your eyes again and take a deep breath in. Let your breath out. Breathe in again for a count of 3, out for a count of 3. And again, in 2, 3, out 2, 3. Now you're standing in the same overlook spot, and you take a deep breath, a drink of water, and you see a bird flying in the sky in front of you. You watch it as it flies higher and higher, reaching the top of the mountain you're climbing. You take one last look behind you and say a word of gratitude to all the moments that brought you to your current self, and start to climb. As you move over rocks and up the trail, you picture the parts of the world you most want to see change. Every time you reach a boulder or a steep section of the climb, you see another challenge in the world that you want to solve. As you get near the top of the mountain, you realize you need to climb a boulder almost twice your height to reach the very top. You think of all the changes you want to see most in the world. And as you climb that last giant boulder, hand over hand, foot over after foot, you envision that one biggest problem that you are ready to take on. Maybe it's the most important to you, or it's the problem that's at the root of all the others. Maybe you simply feel it call to you. As you climb the boulder, imagine conquering that last thorny challenge and pull yourself on top of it. As you look out at the world from the top of the mountain, you can see the changes created when you conquered the boulder, when you decided to dedicate your life to creating impact. Notice each one and sit with it. See the small changes in individual people, in a community, in a system. What is different? What's better? Because you exist. Hold each one you see. When you're ready, take one deep breath in and out, and open your eyes to write down this part of your journey. The other challenges that you noticed on your way to the top, your boulder, and the changes you see now from your view at the top. This is the world that you called to help create. I hope you'll write these notes down somewhere that you can revisit them when you're feeling small or when you need a reminder of why you do all you do. Or maybe you'll think about it on your next real hike. Speaking for all of us at She's the First, you are a huge reason of why we do what we do. Your passion for change, your commitment, and your dedication to She's the First and to girls everywhere is what inspires us to get up every single day and do our best.
So as we end this year's summit, we want to honor all of you, the work that you've been doing this week, all of the plans that you're making for the school year ahead. While this live STF summit might be ending, the connections, the content that are shared this week, it's always here for you. So please stay in touch with the STF team, with the other campus chapter members from all across the world on Mobilize and on Instagram. We're all in this together, and we can't wait to see all that you're going to achieve throughout this year.
Yay, bye.